so much for this great opportunity, Dr. Jinglin. She's really the role model to follow when it comes to peace education, and to also not just studying and writing so many books about peace education, but also bringing these values to life through her own compassion and empathy. My name is Sahar Khamis, and I'm an associate professor of communication here at the University of Maryland. I'm also an affiliate professor of women's studies and an affiliate professor with the Consortium on Race, Gender, and Ethnicity. And of course, the occasion for having the event is we're celebrating International Women's Month, Women's History Month. International Women's Day was just a few days ago. And I think we do need to tap into women's potential in the area of peace building and peace education, because women do have a lot of potential and talent and skills that are still not used enough in the area of peace building and peace education. So my presentation is actually about towards an educational peace building paradigm, successful experiments, limitations, and future prospects. So basically, I will not try to repeat a lot of the stuff which already Dr. Lin has said, which is very inspiring and informative. I will just ask a few questions. Is religion the problem? What are the greatest problems that we are facing now in terms of peace building and peace education? The importance of peace building and peace building education, formal versus informal education, interfaith dialogue, and I'll talk about my experience and some of the successful examples and initiatives that I've been part of, and youth participation, what I call the golden triangle, and some of the current limitations we are facing and the future prospects that we need to envision or to look at. Before I just jump into all of that very quickly, let me tell you in a nutshell what made me interested in this kind of work in the first place. First of all, I grew up in a Sufi home. I don't know how many of you know about Sufism, but it's a mystical type of spirituality which is very much focused in religious teachings. So whether you're talking about Kabbalah, you're talking about other different types of spiritual experiments. In Islam, Sufism is really stressing the spirituality. So my grandfather on my mom's side was a Sufi sheikh. And that meant I grew in this house where love was in the air. It was really very much part of my upbringing, and it made me have, I hope, a heart for humanity and compassion for others. And then came my also experience being an Egyptian. I'm an Egyptian American. I grew up in Egypt. I was not of the generation of war, I was of the generation of peace. So I grew up very much fond of President Anwar Sadat and looking up to his model of creating the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel as a role model, and thinking of him like this is really a leader and we should follow in his footsteps. So I'm not a Palestinian, I'm not an Israeli, I'm the neighbor next door, but I always had this passion and compassion for trying to find a solution for this kind of conflict, which inspired my work, especially in the area of Jewish-Islamic dialogue, as I'm going to talk about it in a second. And then the third is a very personal aspect, my personal trials, if you will. I had a husband, God bless his soul, who was suffering with a brain cancer for 6.5 years, and I have a son with special needs. He has autism. He is now a young man. And that kind of opened my heart to compassion, not just for my own group of people, my own, ethnic, racial, religious group, if you will, but to all of humanity. If you sit in some of these waiting rooms in these cancer hospitals, God forbid, you don't see people who are just Arabs, Muslims, Black, Indians, Asians, white. You see everybody across the board from every faith, and they're all praying for their loved ones. If you're a parent with a special needs child, that is a very difficult experience. And it unites people in miraculously very, very important ways that are difficult to even explain, because they just care about their loved one. They care about their loved child. Doesn't matter if you are Jewish, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, you still care for your special needs child. So I believe that these three aspects together in combination created my interest in this area of peace building and peace education, and it has been driving my force to engage in interfaith work, and I hope it continues to do so for many years to come. So we live in a world full of challenges. Dr. Lin mentioned some of that: violence, wars, crime, conflicts, discrimination, racism, extremism, terrorism, inequality. I think the list can go on and on and on. Just watching the news, like you mentioned, Dr. Lin, can really give us depression, because we're seeing all of these world problems and agonies and illnesses on a daily basis. Is religion the problem? That is a very important question. A lot of people ask this question. Is religion really the problem? Right? Some people will say, if societies do away with religion, they will develop and modernize. But this argument neglects a whole set of historical, social, political, and economic factors. It is easy to stigmatize religion, or a certain religion, or religion in general, as the source of violent extremism, like the term violent Islamic extremism, which the Pope said, I don't want to use this term ever because I don't want anybody talking about violent Christian extremism or, Catholic fundamentalism or any of that stuff. It is not appropriate to link a particular religion with these kinds of stigmatizing terms, because in reality, violence has no religion and terrorism has no religion. It is pretty much against the values of all great religions worldwide. So the problem is not religion, I argue. The problem is the wrong interpretation and wrong application of religion, right? Also, you can have secular extremists, atheist extremists, or illiberal liberals. People who say we're liberals, we're secular, and then they have very illiberal values, and they want to extinguish their opponents or get rid of them in the most horrific ways. We have seen that happening over and over again. So what is the greatest problem then? If it's not religion, what is the greatest problem we are facing? I argue that ignorance is the greatest problem and the worst enemy. Humans always fear whatever they are ignorant about. With ignorance comes a monolithic world vision. My way or the highway. I'm always right, you are always wrong. Refusal of diversity and lack of acceptance of the other. With ignorance comes the thriving of violence, extremism, and terrorism. The rise of dictatorship and populism, the one-man show, the leader who knows it all and can guide the world, oftentimes in pretty horrific ways and in very unpleasant outcomes and very bad directions, right? So we need to kind of be aware of this, because we're always enemies of whatever we are ignorant about. So if you want to extinguish animosity and hatred, we need to extinguish ignorance first and to overcome it with knowledge and education. The importance of peace building. What is really the difference between peace building and really kind of trying to build this model, in my opinion, from the bottom up, right? Not from the top down. So basically the call for a new educational model or paradigm based on the principles of global citizenship, coexistence, equality, acceptance, and open-mindedness. A lot of young people now, if you ask them, are you American, are you Chinese, are you Egyptian? The answer, I am a global citizen. I am a citizen of the world. We need to kind of really build this new model of global citizenship and coexistence and harmony. Rechanneling competition from the negative to the positive, from the individualism to the collectivism, right? Instead of just focusing on, Dr. Lynn said, capitalism, maybe sometimes just me, and the whole world is centered around me. What about us? Changing to a much more collective model that does not just privilege individual gains at the expense of others and turns it into a zero-sum game, but rather accommodates everyone and includes everyone in a more encompassing and more comprehensive model. Acknowledging individual differences and unique skills, but not limiting creativity. You know the saying, children are smart until they go to school? Because when they're young, the sky's the limit. I can be creative, I can write on the wall, I can do whatever I want, I can fly. And then you go to school, you're like, no, you have these set of rules, you can only do this, but you cannot do that. Well, think about limiting creativity. We need to tap into their own unique skills. And Dr. Lynn talked about how children can be our leaders and our teachers when it comes to peace building. Taking advantage of current resources, especially new communication tools such as the internet, social media, internet-based technologies to spread peace and peace education. As a scholar of communication, of course, that's one of my priorities. How can we tap into social media and new media to spread what we can call, quote-unquote, alternative messages of peace and love and harmony? Formal versus informal education. The formal education, of course, can happen in the school or the college or the university, but that's not where every form of education happens. In fact, we should also privilege and talk about informal education. Outside of the classroom, in community centers, social gatherings, conferences, travel, study abroad programs, places of worship, temples, churches, mosques. Informal education is a much more natural and spontaneous type of education, and therefore, in my opinion, can be much more effective. So I always tell my students, if you have a chance to travel, travel. Study abroad programs, student exchange programs. Grab the opportunity and spread your wings and fly, because that's where the real learning really, really happens, in the real world and outside of the classroom. Peacemaking versus peace building, what are the differences? Peacemaking is more the formal, official, governmental, top-down, imposed, and linear model of making peace, usually from government to government, in an official way. But peace building is more of the informal, grassroots, across the board bottom-up, chosen, circular process. So the peace-building model can be much more effective because it's, again, much more natural, much more organic, much more spontaneous, and represents the people's will and their own needs and wants. People are more affected when they are invested. When you make them participate, when you do something with your own hands, when you're part of the decision making, when you are at the table, right? You will never be on the menu, right? And that means you're going to be part of the decision making. You're going to become more invested, and really you're going to buy into it. Shift from an authoritarian to a more participatory model is what we need here. A more grassroots model, a more bottom-up model, a more people-centered model that really taps into people's needs, wants, talents, resources, individual capacities. This kind of peace building from the bottom up is much more effective. We can talk about public diplomacy, we can talk about soft power rather than hard power, and I teach many of these concepts to my students, and I tell them that's the way to go in the future moving forward. Interfaith dialogue. I've been a member of many different interfaith groups and initiatives. I'm very proud of these groups, and I'll briefly tell you about them. Living here in the DMV, the DC, Washington, Maryland, Virginia area has been a blessing because I got to meet people from all walks of life, from all different races, colors, ethnicities, and religions, and it has been a true blessing. So I'm a member of JIS, which is Jewish Islamic Dialogue Society. As the name implies, it brings together Jews and Muslims, and we now added "and allies." So even if you're not a Jew or a Muslim, but you want to be an ally, you're welcome to come and attend our talks. And in these meetings, we don't just talk about what unites us. We also talk about what separates us. In other words, we can talk about our similarities, and we do, and we learn a lot from them. But we also talk about our differences. What are some of the differences? Because you can learn a lot from your differences, not just from your similarities. I'm also a member of the Sisterhood of Salam Shalom, which is an excellent initiative uniting together women who are Jewish and Muslim. Now we have thousands of members, and there are thousands more on the waiting list, waiting to get into some of the chapters within the United States, and we now have branches in Canada. We want this to be a global movement. And you know what? We will. Women's power, yes. So we do believe in this. The ability of women, as I said, as bridge builders and peacemakers, that's a potential that we really need to build on and tap into. The workshop, Jewish and Muslim Women's Leadership in Peace Building, is an initiative that myself and Dr. Jing Lin have actually participated in. That was 6 years ago. I can't believe it, time flies, as they say. We brought together a group of brilliant Jewish and Muslim young women who are students here at the University of Maryland, and we made them attend this wonderful workshop for one day. They came up with excellent ideas, brainstorming. They came up with initiatives like creating a book club, maintaining their own discussion board and threads online, which were very effective. So, and they still have conversations going on. I still have them on my Facebook page. We are still friends. I see where they are right now in life. And it's been a great, great, great initiative. I hope that we can engage in more initiatives like this one moving forward. The course Youth Voices Online, a digital experiment in Middle East peace building, is an initiative that is underway. Professor Eddie Kaufman and Professor Emmanuel Hassanian, one is Israeli, one is Palestinian. They have been engaging in co-teaching for peace building and peace education for the last 25 years. That is a long, long time. And they're trying to put together this course. Part of it is going to be online to try to engage students from different parts of the Middle East to try to engage in the process of peace building using online resources. And they invited me to be part of this great team. So I hope that we're able to crystallize this kind of great experiment and make it a reality and launch this course in the very near future. Youth participation, successful examples, my favorite one. So I have some of my students here, right? So we have the Sulia International Connect program. It was very successful in both Qatar University, where I've been teaching for 3 years, and for the last 12 years, which is the time I've been here on campus at the University of Maryland. So now I feel ancient. That has been 15 years already, and students have always loved this program. So what is this program all about? This is a program that actually brings together youth from different parts of the world through intercultural dialogue, through internet-based communication. So they have weekly sessions, they get together on the internet, they get connected online, and they exchange information and knowledge, and they talk about different aspects of peace building, peace education, conflict resolution, the role of the media, you name it. So that links young people across the West and the Middle East through internet-based communication. And it promotes values of tolerance, conflict resolution, and interfaith dialogue. And it has been successfully implemented at the University of Qatar, as I said, for 3 years, and also at the University of Maryland for the last 12 years. And my students always loved it. I've always had students come back with great feedback. This is a great program. We learned so much from it. It was awesome to get to hear other people's views and ideas, and some of them even become moderators and facilitators moving forward, and they build long-term sustainable relationships with their counterparts in these programs. So how it works is you get the students together in some of these dialogue sessions. That's what it looks like. They have different windows. They're together online for 2-hour sessions every week, and they engage in some of these discussions, and they are very much structured and moderated and facilitated by a trained moderator or a facilitator. So they're sharing their views and ideas about all different issues, of course. And the results show that there's a big shift in their opinions and attitudes about the other, with a capital O, right? Before and after engaging in this online program and dialogue. So if you look here at the before and the after, if you look at the Middle Eastern students, you look at the European and American students, before they had certain views of the other, and after engaging in the program, a lot of their opinions and views shifted in a favorable and positive direction, because they gained much more knowledge and awareness about the other with a capital O, and now the other maybe is not an other anymore because I got to know them better. That's the whole purpose of the program. So the golden triangle, that's my favorite part. I wanted to really propose this golden triangle, which has 3 important dimensions: youth leadership, utilization of social media, and grassroots mobilization. I feel that this is really the answer or the solution moving forward. We need a grassroots movement or movements from the bottom up, as we talked before, peace building, from the bottom up, grassroots, people-centered approach. At the same time, we need to tap into young people, youth. Youth are the future, and we need to have them on board. We need to have them with us in this initiative, because they're going to shape the future in a better direction. They're also the agents of change, and they're also technologically savvy. And social media as our alternative platforms, because remember, the mainstream media does not always do a good job in the area of peace building. Sometimes we have the principle, when it bleeds, it leads. In other words, when you have bloodshed and conflict and war, that's when the camera starts rolling and you make the headlines. But we want to change this model. We want to have alternative platforms for peace building and peacemaking. That can only happen if you tap into social media and new media, and use this golden triangle with these 3 important dimensions or components. So why youth leadership? Very briefly, because they're the fastest growing segment of the population where reform and action and change is needed. 70% of the population, for example, in the Arab world are now young people. And if you go to the Gulf, the number is over 90%. Can you imagine? They're the agents of change with their open-mindedness, desire for reform, creativity, energy, and determination. They're technologically savvy and comfortable with new media and new technologies. And why the new media? Well, the new media accelerate the spread of messages and information to a very wide audience. They raise awareness of corruption and repression. They mobilize and coordinate resistance movements. They provide platforms for brainstorming. And they keep pressure after revolutions happen on autocratic regimes, which does not always happen to be the case, but that is what is hoped for, at least, to stay on track. So, what are the current limitations facing us? Changing existing mindsets and patterns of thinking is very, very important. Cultural challenges, giving more empowerment to women and minorities and youth, very important. Listening to more diverse voices. Pluralization, pluralism, and diversity, not polarization. Pluralization is good, polarization is bad. Like basically, my way or the highway, we are on 2 diametrically opposed ends, we can never meet. Polarization is bad, but pluralization is very much needed. Fighting against existing structures of bias, inequality, and discrimination. The mainstream media, as I said, when it bleeds, it leads. We need to stay away from this model and tap into social media and new media. Social media can be a double-edged sword as well. It can help to bridge the gaps, but it can also increase the polarization and the division. If it falls in the wrong hands, it can spread hatred or hate speech or Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, sexism, you name it. So we have to be careful how we are using social media to gain the benefits and to avoid some of the downsides. Social media are catalysts, but they are not magical tools. They're not going to make the change in the world happen all by themselves. It's us, the people on the ground, doing the actual work, the actual education and writing and teaching and activism that can actually make the change happen. And the social media are only tools that can help you, but they cannot substitute you or replace you. The digital divide between the technological haves and have-nots. As much as we are hailing this new phenomenon of the internet and social media and awesome, but remember, it is not the end all be all. Because there are parts of the world where people simply don't have internet access, or they don't have the infrastructure. They don't have 24/7 high-speed internet. They don't have technological or technical literacy. So all of these things have to be taken into account as some of our current limitations. So the challenges ahead include finding effective means through affordable technology to bridge not only cultures, but also spoken languages. How can we get online and try to bridge some of the different barriers? Okay, technological barriers, cultural barriers, as well as linguistic barriers. The stakes have never been higher, but the opportunities have never been greater either. And the future prospects ahead of us, and that's my last slide, changing from the sender-receiver model to the interactive communication model. In other words, we as now consumers of media, we are both senders and receivers simultaneously at the same time. We are not just sitting there passively receiving whatever the media is sending to us, because you yourself can be the creator, not just the consumer of social media and new media, and you can use it for the purpose of peace building and peace education. From one-way communication to two-way communication and learning. Again, it's an interactive two-way process, not a one-way process. From top-down to bottom-up education and learning. We need to shift, as we said before, from the top-down model to a bottom-up approach, which is more grassroots-based and more centered on the people and people's engagement in peace building. Investing in young people, youth. Many of you in this room are young people, yes? Empowering them and using them as very important participants in the process of peace building in the future. Women, Women's Month, right? Women's History Month and Women's International Day. Investing in women and women's leadership in peace building. Expanding the reliance on social media and new media to create alternative communication models and parallel communication models which give voice to the voiceless, right? So if you're not going to be in the mainstream media, create your own website, create your own podcast, create your own webinar. You can do it from the convenience of your own living room, on your cell phone, on your laptop. I have my own radio program for the last 6 years, and I do it from my own living room, from my own laptop. Expanding peace-building education to go beyond tolerance to true understanding. So we need to move beyond just tolerance, I tolerate you, that's not a good thing, to true understanding, compassion, love, and true peace. And thank you very much.